We know that over the last year, interest rates have definitely gone up, although they do seem to be leveling off a little bit at the rates that they've risen to. We know that there's an increase in available inventory in the housing market, including right here in central Maine. Is it finally time to admit that this is a housing bubble that is ready to burst, or are we simply returning to some kind of normalcy in the housing market? What's going to happen with prices? Stick around, we're going to get into this today. Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. It is your realtor Nick Isgro with eXp Realty here in central Maine. As I stated at the beginning, we're going to dive right into some new and interesting numbers that aren't totally off the wall, but are going to give us some insight and make some predictions as to what is happening in the housing market. Because as you turn on the mainstream media, as you turn on the talking heads, a lot of the things we hear about is housing bubble ready to burst, housing prices going down. A lot of people in the market, both buyers and sellers, are asking me what's going on because what they're hearing doesn't always line up with what the experience is in the market, or vice versa, their experience in the market is lining up a little bit with what they're seeing. So we want to sort all of this out today. Now, before I get into that, I do want to welcome you here to the channel. If you've never been here before, we cover all things real estate here in the state of Maine, but particularly in the central Maine market. If that's of interest to you or adds value to your process in the buying and selling of homes, do me a favor, go ahead and like this video, hit subscribe, knock that little alarm bell. You'll be notified every time we put out new content. Now, let's jump right into the numbers. Let's see what's going on nationally, and then we'll talk a little bit about what's going on right here in central Maine, right here in Kennebec County. Now, first things first, we've got to admit that there is definitely a shift that's been going on in the housing market. In fact, we've talked about that here on this channel quite a bit over the last several months. As the changes have been occurring, we're trying to bring them to you live time so we can analyze them and make predictions to go forward. So hopefully that's been helpful. What we've seen on a national level is that overall active inventories have risen nationally 26% year over year. At the same time, showing activity, which we track through an app that is called Showing Time, that pretty much every realtor that is affiliated with the National Association of Realtors uses to schedule all of our showings, we know active showings are down year over year 17%. So there's less people looking at homes on a regular basis year over year, which then would make sense that there's less activity going into the sales side. So that means inventories are rising. It's not necessarily a flood of new people coming to the market as far as numbers of new people coming in. It's that the sales have slowed so that there's a chance for the inventory that's on the market to not get bought in like 3 days and sit there a little bit longer. Over time, that's going to mean an increase in inventory. If we're not selling at as rapid of a clip, but the inventory keeps coming on at the same pace, just that alone is going to be something that increases inventory. In fact, it's what we've seen a lot of right here in central Maine. Now just take a look at this graph here. This will put into perspective why the supply is growing. You can see that the supply side has gone up. You can see active showings have gone down, and so there's opposite buyer and seller activity. Seller activity continues to go on the market. Buyer activity seems to be cooling off. The two combined are going to cause an overall result of a rising inventory. So in fact, right here in Kennebec County last month, it wasn't quite this drastic, and this isn't really a statistic of year over year, this is month over month. So we're gonna say August 2021 to August 2022. Here in central Maine, year over year, we had an increase of active inventory of 7%, so not as drastic as the 26%, but definitely an increase of inventory, and buyers are feeling it. Anecdotally, when I'm out in the market right now, I'm just getting a lot more buyer activity. A lot more buyers are coming out, a lot more buyers are contacting me. We're looking at a lot more homes because there's more homes to see. So, and they're sitting there a little bit longer, by the way. So that gives buyers an opportunity to go in, get the feel of the place, determine if it's really the right house for them. So I wouldn't be surprised if going forward, here's a prediction, we start seeing that showing time activity ticking up a little bit. Be interesting to see that here just in central Maine, because I can say my personal experience is I'm working a lot more with buyers over this last couple of months than I have in a very, very long time. However, we just said that we had an increase of inventory in August year over year of 7%. Well, sales in that same time period, August over August, in Kennebec County were down 14%. Pending contracts, that means homes that went into escrow during the month, were down 35% year over year. So that's just 1 month of activity. So unless we put it on an annualized basis, probably hard to say what exactly those numbers are year over year, but it gives us a good sense. Now, I can tell you that for the first couple of weeks of this month in September, we had activity of, in the teens, 16, 19 people going under contract in any given week. This last week that we just measured, we had 30 homes go under contract here in Kennebec County. So that might be indicative of either we just had a busy week or sales activity is going to start picking back up. Remember, we just went through the end of summer. People were going on vacation. People were getting their kids back to school. There is sometimes a normal slowdown, and perhaps those people have bounced back and are coming back into the market. Either way, sellers are actually not going anywhere. In fact, it actually is still a seller's market. If you remember the activity that we saw at the end of last month, we had really just over 1 month of inventory. And as we say all the time, a normalized market between buyers and sellers is 6 months of inventory. And this is always the hanging question when we're talking about a housing bubble. Kind of hard to say we're in a housing bubble that's about to burst when we still barely have inventory to meet demand that's out in the market. Only a little bit over 1 month of inventory. So that's what's driving prices. And in fact, even though the sales activity slowed down, even though the pending contracts slowed down, sales prices, average sale price, were up almost 6% last month, which shows that homes are continuing to appreciate in this market. Now, what's important to remember is that we did see this statistic here. Bringing this up here, this is sale to original list price ratio right here in Central Maine. What we saw was actually a drop. We saw a drop to just below 100%. Now, if we looked at sale to list price ratio, it would have been a little bit over 100% or right about at 100%. What this shows is that price reductions have been occurring in the market because the original list price was lower than what these people were actually getting at the time of the sale. Even though they were getting about 100% of their list price, it wasn't to the original list price. So we have seen some price reductions, probably a good sign that future sales, future homes coming to the market, while we can count on some appreciation, probably not going to be quite so aggressive as maybe we were in anticipating that appreciation maybe last April and May. So where does that leave us? So where are prices going as we head into the coming year? What's going to happen with the home prices? Let's see what the experts say. Well, out of 6 national forecasts for home prices, only 1 is calling for home depreciation. And while certainly anything could happen, we cannot totally predict the future, the average of all of these forecasts is for homes to appreciate at about 2.5%. Now that's a far cry from the double-digit increases we saw year over the last 2 years, and even a lot of the predictions, if you remember, from Zillow, Goldman Sachs coming into 2022 predicting really huge appreciations on the home. Well, that definitely happened coming out of the gate from the early spring. Not really happening now. We have moderated, and it looks like going forward, if you're a seller that's still thinking about selling in the home, you're probably not going to miss much, because it looks like most likely you're still going to be able to take whatever value has been cooked in over the last couple of years and add another 2.5% to that. It's just not going to be as crazy and as frankly unsustainable as it was over the last 2 pandemic years. So that's really the data that we have for you today. While there's definitely some overheated markets around the state maybe, and definitely around the country that might see some signs of home value depreciation if they were a little overheated. By and large, we should expect is a moderation of the market. Sales are still higher than they were a couple of years ago pre-pandemic. The activity is still higher than it was pre-pandemic. It's just not as high as it was during the quote-unquote pandemic years. So that is the forecast for now. As always, we're going to continue to bring you this stuff as shifts happen, maybe right here in Central Maine or anything we see on the national level. We're going to bring that information to you live time because it's important to follow through with the mission, which the mission here is to make sure that you are the most prepared buyer or seller or investor in the Central Maine real estate market. Now, if you are in the market right now, or maybe you've been in the market, maybe you just are sitting on the sidelines, but you have some crazy predictions, would love to hear from you. Please go ahead and drop a comment below. As always, if you guys are looking for a real estate professional here in the Central Maine market, my name is Nick Isgro. Feel free to drop me a line. All of my contact information is in the post below. Feel free to call, text, write, whatever is most convenient for you. I'll get right back to you. Thanks so much for sticking around to the end of this video, and I will see you next time.